Hello, hello. This is Darren. It is Matthew on Mondays on a Wednesday for probably about 3 more weeks or so. Then we'll be back on the Monday slot, I think. That's probably most likely what's going to happen. Welcome to you watching. I know it's been a minute since we put something out, but we got a little hectic over the Christmas period. I actually had COVID for a little bit, and so now we're all coming back. We're refreshed. Today, we're going to be looking at Matthew 4:12 through 23, the lectionary gospel text for this coming Sunday in year A of the Revised Common Lectionary. I think some guests will be joining us soon, per usual, and we're going to jump into that. Just to kind of give you some context, if you're out there, feel free to put something in the Facebook comments. If you're watching through Facebook Live, we'll try to look at them and respond to them as we can. Make sure to like it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment there too, or if there's a live chat, you can jump right into that too, and we will see that come up and be able to respond to you either verbally or in writing as well. So, hope this is interesting for you, and I will just take a look at the text. I don't know how much we'll read of it, but just take a look at it. Just so you know, we are in Matthew chapter 4. The chapter begins with the temptation, but of course that will be reserved in the lectionary for the first Sunday in Lent, so we will come back to that. But after the temptation scene, you have Jesus begins his ministry in Galilee, starting in chapter 12. So let me read a little bit of this. Now, when Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew to Galilee. He left Nazareth and made his home in Capernaum by the sea, in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, so that what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. Land of Zebulun, land of Naphtali, on the road by the sea, across the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. And for those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. From that time, Jesus began to proclaim, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near." The next little segment of this deals with the calling of disciples. You have Jesus by the Sea of Galilee, calls Simon and Andrew, and then calls James and John. And then immediately after that, we pick up just verse 23 of ministry to the crowds. Jesus went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness among the people. All right. Okay, so that is the context. That's what we're talking about. And we'll jump back over here. One thing I wanted to show right in the beginning, maybe to set some context before anybody else shows up. We have I just thought of this interesting little bit of the text where it says in 13, he left Nazareth and made his home in Capernaum by the sea. I wanted to draw people's attention to this video lecture by John Dominic Crossan, which is on the Homebrewed Christianity YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the chat there. But let me show you a little bit of this, which I think is interesting. Let's see. Let me see if I can pull up this just a little screenshot here. I'll make this, see if I make this big, what it looks like. Yeah, so this is John Dominic Crossan talking to the host of Homebrew Christianity, Trip Fuller. If you haven't checked out their stuff, you should do it. But what he's talking about is how around this time of Jesus' ministry, that Herod Antipas moves his capital from Sepphoris to Tiberias. Sepphoris, which is closer to Nazareth geographically, and then moves it to Tiberias on the sea. Now, Crossan gets into some speculation about this, suggests that Herod Antipas, who's trying to become king of the Jews, more or less, petitioning Rome repeatedly to become the sole kind of ruler over that whole region instead of having it split between different people, suggests that he moves his city to the sea because he's already figured out how to maximize the taxes and the profits and the tribute that can be taken, that can be sent to Rome in the area of the grains and that agricultural area in Sepphoris and around that area. He's mastered that and is appreciated for that. And now he's moving his location to Tiberias on the sea to try to now master the fishes. As Crossan says, he's mastered the loaves, and now he's going to go and try to master getting as much tribute and taxes as he can from the sea in order to send tribute to Rome and to strengthen his case to be the king of the Jews. And so you see here that you have that move from Herod Antipas, and then what you'll see is from the text that we just read from Matthew, you also have the similar move of Jesus moving from Nazareth up to Capernaum, right along the sea as well, not directly into the capital area, but just above, among the poor fishermen there. So I thought that was interesting to highlight, because I think it gives a kind of an interesting backdrop to what Jesus is doing, moving from Nazareth to Capernaum and being along the Sea of the Galilee, just as this time as Herod Antipas is putting the squeeze on this area, and you most likely have at this time a number of people who were fishing for, sustenance, sustaining themselves, reproducing themselves through the fishing industry, maybe selling a little bit of it, but also, just being able to subsist on this profession and on this skill. But then as Herod comes in, you have the exploitation of these fishermen, the extraction of the little bit of fish and food and money that they might have gotten, and seeing this now being sucked up into Herod's hands and then also transferred over to Rome. So you have a large base of people who are experiencing economic hardship, a squeeze, basically oppression from the ruler, someone new to the area. And so you get this dynamic where you can imagine that Jesus enters this into ministry among these fishermen at a time when they are agitated and upset with the imperial rule as manifested by Herod, and also not only upset but also hurting, struggling as well. So I thought that was important context. I see that Mark has made it. So hey, Mark.
Hey, Darren, what's going on?
It's okay. It's okay.
I missed your like Johnny Carson monologue.
Yeah. Right.
I heard you talking about the end of the lake and the fisherman thing. What were you saying about that?
So I was just saying that I was watching this video. I think I sent it to you, but
Yeah, I
it
just know that.
the video talks about how at the time of Jesus, or right around the time of Jesus, that Herod had moved his capital. Let me show. I'll just show the image that I have up.
Okay.
So Herod's capital was previously in Cyprus, which was here around the same area as Nazareth. And
Okay.
around this time, he moves it to Tiberias, and actually names it after the emperor at the time. He
Are you
goes through all of
serious?
this. Yeah. And so he builds this city here. And then, of course, the sea is changed to the Sea of Tiberias.
Okay.
And then in the text that we read, in verse 13, it says that Jesus moved from Nazareth to Capernaum. Um, and that's where he began his ministry.
So
So you have
that
you have
star north, that star north of the other one. That's where he.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Herod Antipas moves his capital from this area over here, and then Jesus moves his ministry, or himself at least before he starts his ministry, up here along the same sea region where Herod is. And I was saying that the person who's talking this video is suggesting that part of what's happening is that Herod had learned in the agricultural region how to exploit, and drain the most taxes and tribute, but now he was in a ploy to try to become, the sole ruler of the Jews, the king of the Jews, without having to share this power. That he moves to the sea in order to try to begin to also extract all of the taxes and revenue he can get out of the fishing business, and so also to send that tribute over. So there is this there's a dynamic, an economic dynamic going on at the same time
Yeah.
as Jesus' ministry, which sets the stage for disgruntled crowds, and also obviously hurting crowds as well, people
Right.
who are struggling at the time.
That's
So
interesting, because I think Carter talks about that aspect of it. He talks about more that he didn't talk about her. He talks about the Romans, how the
yeah,
Romans also can have a lot of control over um, the fishing industry or fishermen and what
yeah,
have you. So yeah,
right,
but either way you look at it, where you want to say it's Herod or it's Rome,
right,
Empire is trying to get this clause in the stuff.
right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the way that Carter talks about it, he says their identity as fishermen means involvement in the imperial economic and political monopoly.
Mhm.
Fish were claimed as revenue for the empire.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And actually the well, John Dominic Crossan is a fairly famous New Testament scholar who's talking in that video, but he puts it how does he asked the question, who controls the fishes. I mean, this is the this is the question that needs to be behind some of the all the fish scenes in Jesus ministry,
Yeah.
because at the time there is a representative of the Roman Empire with a city on the sea claiming that the fish belong to Caesar, you know, and you have someone coming along, uh, you know, bringing in miraculous catches, multiplying fishes, and this is a direct challenge to the
Exactly.
one who owns the fishes, so to
All the
speak.
fishes. Yeah. 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 It's Darren, the more and more I read, and I think I posted this on Facebook, the more and more I understand and that how much empire is is a huge shadowy backdrop or background,
Right.
especially to New Testament.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that I don't think we fully recognize or give voice to that as a fact as we study scripture. I don't
Right.
think we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's become harder and harder for us, obviously because we um sit in the belly of the beast, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah,
are
yeah,
we are in the home of the empire. We are, in many ways we are the empire for so
yeah,
many people around the world, and for so many people within our borders. You know, that's what we represent. Um and the church has very seldom claimed its place as anti-imperialist, you know.
yeah. And
eh,
because when you read Carter and you also read what's the other lady's name, Case, it's
mhm,
definitely it is definitely the hermeneutic that the
right,
the alternate the alternate narrative is not empire, but it's not, but it's this community in which folks are welcomed. That you,
right.
when you come to this community, hopefully we can undo the damage done by empire. But
Mhm.
it seems like because we don't maybe because we don't acknowledge the fact that we are an empire ourselves, that we're not becoming this alternate healing community that we should be.
Right. Right. No, I think that's probably a big part of it for sure. What well, I mean, and it also leads to, it leads to a whole different style and way of practicing your faith, right? It's certainly
Yeah,
not a personal pietistic kind of thing.
right.
You know,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. I mean, because it means that that this is I don't like to use the term radical, Darren. That's the only word I can think of. And a radical can have different connotations, but
mhm,
it's definitely a lot. It's definitely I'll have to use the word radical. It's definitely more radical than what we describe it.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think you're right. I think you're right.
And I mean, as we look at this text, when he gets to um like when we did the verse 18, and I guess when we look at that whole piece, knowing the gospels are not uh one by one biographical, that what you
Right.
have is a summary. I'm sure Jesus had it was
Right.
a much longer conversation. No, he didn't just say,
Yeah.
"Hi, follow me." He said probably introduce himself. He talked to them,
Right.
shared his vision of
Yeah.
of the community and ministry, and for
Mhm.
them leaving right away, following this whole piece about empire buying in,
Mhm.
they probably were under some contractual obligation.
Yep. Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
then by leaving, they walked away from their contractual obligations, which is
Right.
that's another strike at empire.
Yeah. Well, and it's literally a strike. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a wildcat strike, right? I mean, they're walking off the job,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
um, yeah, yeah,
And they're
no,
saying that we will no longer let this system define who we are and what we can be.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I was thinking about, yeah, I mean, I think there's so much summarized in these little words, I mean, I was thinking about this on, for Sunday is just, even the way it summarizes all the healings.
Yeah,
It's like it's hard to imagine all the people that is encompassed in that one line. I mean, all the pain and hurt
yeah.
and misery
And these are the
that's
folks that were neglected by the religious establishment.
right,
Certainly neglected by Rome, because Rome don't give a crap about nobody.
right.
But those who's the priest and
Mm,
the religious system structure was supposed to be pastoral for these folks.
right.
I mean, these are the folks that are neglected by them.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think it's interesting too, like, you mentioned this in some of your notes too. I mean, that Well, we don't, that text for the text that I read on Sunday is not normally the text that's read, but I think
Okay.
thinking of that John the Baptist text that, that comes in 3 at the beginning of 3, and then this text at the end of 4,
Yeah.
bracketing those 2 texts around, Martin Luther King's the celebration of Martin Luther King
Yeah.
is has been really interesting for me, like you know, well, like you're saying here, like in particular that line where John is arrested and Jesus picks up the ministry, but in Mark he just starts preaching, in Matthew he withdraws, and then he starts
That's pretty. Yeah.
preaching. But I think there is that, I was reading oh do I don't know what I did with it, but oh shoot, I don't see it here right now. I got it. I was reading Vincent Harding's. He has a little kind of biography of King.
You wrote a couple books. I can't think of any of his books.
Yeah, There Is a River, I think, is his
Okay.
famous kind of
Yeah,
history.
maybe that's it.
But,
Yeah.
is it backwards? Oh no, but he wrote this.
No,
He
you
wrote
got it.
this little, and it's called An Inconvenient Hero.
Okay.
And he picks up on the last years of King's life and talks about how few people were ready to take on the mantle of what he was talking about in the later years of his life.
Mhm.
That when everybody started to kind of veer a certain different direction.
Right.
Um, in a lot of the, at least the church leadership. I mean, the
Yeah.
Black Power movement kind of picked up some of the direction where he was going. You know, as far as militarism and that sort of thing goes,
Right.
but as far as the crowd that he was running with, and so I was thinking about that, that I always think about that, how, if someone is arrested, usually the thing that people don't do is go and do exactly what that person was doing.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
Yeah.
you already know, what just happened,
Well, yeah.
like, I mean,
Right. Right. Yep. Yep.
like it's a pretty clear sign that what
Yeah.
that person was doing is not appreciated by a bunch
Yeah.
of people.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I think that, obviously that's a clear lesson from King too. I mean, if someone is assassinated, in who's saying that we need to stop the Vietnam War and spend the
Yeah.
money on the poor, and if
Yeah.
we, all these things, and then they get assassinated. Of course, not many people are going to pick up the call, because I mean,
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
it's someone they've done told you
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
this is not a good
Yeah.
way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. But and talking about King, I was listening to on Martin Luther King Day, Jamar Tisby does a blog
Mm,
or a podcast, and he
mm,
was talking about that one of the aspects that we don't talk about in terms of King is his concern in terms of economics and
mhm,
economic injustice and economic empowerment. And right here in this text,
right,
this is, I mean, that's clear. These folks were under contract. They weren't
right,
producing. I mean, this is a strike against economics, against
mm,
economic injustice, and saying that
right,
in the kingdom of God, we're not going to tolerate this type of
right,
injustice anymore.
right,
And
right,
something that
yeah,
King also talked about too, in his work about the
yeah.
economic issues.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot in there. There's a
Yeah,
lot in there for sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I've also been really interested in thinking about King's idea, like you were saying earlier about what Jesus is trying to create as an alternative.
mhm,
The King had this idea of the beloved community,
uh-huh,
which, you know, in some ways gets kind of hijacked and trivialized a little bit, as kind of like a kumbaya,
Right.
end of the I have a dream speech
Yeah.
kind of, people
Right.
holding hands kind of
Uh-huh.
thing.
Hmm.
But, and again, you know, in the context of what all of King was saying later in his life, what he meant by the beloved community was something a lot different than just, going about our business, but trying to be nice to
It meant
different races at the same
it meant
time,
real transformation and real transformation and of certain issues. I mean,
Mhm.
I saw an article. uh, I think it was on MSN today. They were talking about um, the stark rise in homelessness
Mhm.
in this country. And
Yeah.
you know, I was telling my wife, or telling a friend of mine that over the holidays, one of the things we did was they built some condos down the street, and I said, I just want to see what the heck I'm getting for
Mhm.
$390,000. And when I look around this area, when I see the new homes or condos being built, I don't see nothing that's affordable.
Right.
Nothing. Everything is at
Right.
least
Right.
390, 400. I'm
Mhm.
thinking, where are these people working?
Right, right, right.
The
Right.
qua so my point is that Richmond has always had an affordable housing issue, and
Right.
I just don't see that in this area even
Mhm.
being scratched, touched at all.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. I
Yeah,
know. I mean,
yeah,
it's,
and I think that's one of the issues that the Virginia Interfaith, group is trying to bring up from the General
mhm.
Assembly again, this issue of affordable housing, and I just don't. I mean, I've been hearing about this issue in this area for years.
Right.
And I just don't understand why folks don't address that. Just don't address this issue.
Well, and I mean, and then you start thinking about what you're saying, like, you're saying, like, where do the people who afford those houses,
Yeah,
what are their jobs? But I mean, the thing is, what are the jobs for the people who want a $30,000 house? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, what, where are those jobs? I mean, I
yeah,
mean, there's
yeah,
just the and and w- and so there's a lot of those kind of jobs that might get you that kind of money, but they're not. It used to be that you could keep a job. You know what I mean? Like
right,
you could be assured that your job might be around, but
yeah,
nowadays, so many of the things that you do, you don't know day one to the next. Whether you'll still be there or
right.
whether you'll be cut back or
And things are transitioning so much, Darren. I mean, when I first started working for Department of Social Services, I mean, back in the when I started working with in 1989, whatever it was, 89. A lot of our clients used to work for jobs like Philip Morris, and
hmm
I
hmm
mean, but I mean, those type of jobs are gone.
yeah,
They're gone. I mean, those are
yeah,
jobs in which a lot of my customers, they could do what they had to do. They were paying the rent, paying the mortgage, paying a car note.
hmm
They would not be rich, but they were fairly comfortable. But those
hopefully paying their
jobs
child
are gone.
support.
Yeah, paying the child support, but those jobs are gone.
Right,
I mean,
right.
they're gone. So
Yeah.
I don't know what I don't know what folks are doing nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the interesting thing because, this is the situation, you know, that Jesus ministry comes into,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's always the situation, where that Jesus ministry comes into. So, um, how how is that supposed to shape us as the church?
yeah.
Um,
And that's why I keep on saying that. I think I always say that one of the things that we have to do. I'm reading another one of Carter's books. I don't know if I mentioned it or not. It's called Jesus and the Empire of God. And he
mhm,
talks about in the first chapter. He does a awesome job of breaking down the social economics of the time,
mhm,
and basically
right,
he breaks it down. From those folks who were, I guess, maybe senators in Rome, and what
right,
their economic status were, and they were comfortable, had landowners on down to
right.
the folks like we're talking the Texas,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or who are fishermen who really didn't really know,
Right.
The next that so many folks we did not know where their next meal is coming from. And that's I
Yep.
was telling somebody the other day that in the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread is so pregnant because the folks
Yeah.
really did not know whether they're going to eat today or not.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's right. And I think, mm, it's when we think about, I mean, even just the announcement, that the kingdom of God is at hand.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, the reason why those fishermen are saying yes is because it looks clear that something different is going on.
Something
That
different's happening. They they
something's
they were captured by the vision
right,
of a new inbreaking reality
right,
that says that yes, you matter, fishermen. Because
right.
I think about fishermen, they were probably mostly rich, ceremonially unclean
Yeah,
by the nature of the work they did. So they were, I mean, they were outcast that way. So you matter, fishermen. You may not
right,
make all that much money, and you may be unclean, but you matter. You're part of
right,
the community of God. God cares about you.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. I just it's hard to imagine how we as the church, you know, get a hold of this vision and think about how we make it how we make it what we're about.
Yeah, I think one of the problems or struggles we have nowadays that I don't know. I don't think we do a good job of saying that to folks that you matter.
Mhm.
That you matter.
Right.
Um, um, you
Yeah.
know, we just I don't I think we need to find a way of doing a better job of saying that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you say that because I was looking at some different um, statistics and data stuff about just about church, who goes to church and this, the
Mhm.
nuns and all this stuff,
Yeah.
and what's really interesting is that you know the group that really doesn't go to church or participate, in a religious institution, are the poorer, are poorer people.
Wow.
That's people think that it's more like the PhDs and the rich people. They get too
Yeah.
smart, they don't go to church anymore. But that's not. It's actually the higher groups are people with either no high school or only high school, and people who are in the lower economic brackets are the
Yeah.
ones who are the least likely to be, to have a, church affiliation. I mean, they don't that's not to say that they claim to be atheist. I mean,
Right.
most of them believe in God,
But they're just
but
not part of an
the
organized
actual but
community.
they don't find a home, you know, in those communities, um, which is really interesting when you think about who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be about, you know. Uh,
What do you think is the background of most
right.
folks who attend a Presbyterian church?
I would say the Presbyterian Church is anyone from teachers, like that kind of professional level,
Okay.
maybe nurses, that sort
Okay.
of thing, and then up to you know people, white collar, middle
Okay.
management, up
Okay.
to up and up, as far as business owners, that sort of thing. I
Okay.
would say that's the main, has always been kind of the main backbone
Okay.
of the Presbyterian Church, so solidly middle class, um, and more,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
uh,
Now, you think that's true across all the entire geography of the country, or is that
I mean, I think probably in some, in some churches it's different, but I mean, in most of the church, I mean, Presbyterian Church is a solidly mainline church, that's always had I mean, it's just this, the style of worship, the style
Okay.
of the wordiness of everything that we do, the,
Okay.
I mean, like
Okay.
it's just really set at a certain academic level, and then at a
Wow.
certain,
Okay.
I mean, it's just like, it just really is uncomfortable for certain people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a not very energetic, in general, overall. So, I
Okay.
mean, this, they call them the frozen chosen. So,
That's cute. Okay.
but I mean, you could say the same about the Episcopal Church,
Maybe so.
many of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
white Methodist, side of
Okay.
things. I
Okay.
mean, um, it's Lutherans. I mean, that's kind of that whole group.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I wonder what has happened if your demographic you gave is right in terms of those now attend church. What
Right.
has happened that those folks who are struggling economically, socially, or in other ways don't find a message that attracts them
Right.
to join the mainline church.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think some of it, is like for the working poor. I mean, there's no Sundays off. There's
That's
no,
true.
I
That's
mean,
true.
there's no, you don't get those weekends like, like that. There was a time when
Yeah.
you could have that free.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a part of it. I think that, I mean, unfortunately, I don't really know what, I mean. I mean, it's I don't know. It's hard. It's hard
Well,
to imagine.
it's multifaceted, and I
Yeah.
think that I probably have alluded earlier. That I think one of the issues for me is that I think we lost a lot of opportunity to attract folks through the various social movements. For example,
Mhm.
in 2020, with
Right.
George Floyd and all that. We just lost an opportunity to reach a lot of folk
Right.
by not maybe being as vocal about these social justice issues.
Right.
Uh, yeah,
Well, and I think that, I mean, there's, unfortunately, I think too, is that because the churches have I mean, most churches that you find yourself in, they are of a certain demographic.
yeah,
Almost everyone in the church is going to be around the same income level, around the same,
yeah.
I mean,
You're
like,
right. Yeah,
and so you would have to, for poor people to go to church, you'd have to have a church that was basically all poor people.
yeah.
And so,
Um,
first of all, who's going to be their pastor? You know, because
yeah,
they
you're
can't,
right.
because they
You're right.
can't,
Yeah, you're
they
right.
can't, they can't pay you.
Yeah, you're right. You're
And
right.
then, you know, if you are stuck in a church where it's all people of the same demographic and everyone's poor, how can you even help each other? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you're not, you know, and you'd have to really, and of course, churches don't imagine themselves set up to be, you know, kind of mutual aid societies and really
mm,
focus on helping each other in that way.
yeah,
A lot of churches that end up ministering to the poor kind of like, trying to offer them, 3 tips for getting economically savvy or whatever, you know what I
right,
mean? Like
right.
trying to get them back into the system, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
instead
You've
of
had very
instead of
very movements,
challenging.
very rare movements like Leon Sullivan did in Philadelphia with his OIC.
Mhm.
Yeah, um,
Yeah,
yeah. But yeah, you're right. We did have aspects of that, I guess, in the '60s. I guess I
right,
just throughout Leon Sullivan. But
right,
yeah, yeah, you're right.
yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's another area where we as the church have to figure out have to figure out what's going on and figure out how we best minister in those areas
Right.
because I think that it's not a lack of faith. You know what I mean? It's not a lack of a belief.
Right.
It's
It's theological. It means that
right,
again. It means it's going back to, as we're looking here at this text. I mean, it's a, they use this word again, but a much more radical understanding of what the faith means and what
right,
what this aspect of kingdom of God means.
right, right. Well, I mean, I'll tell you this right now is that almost every, at least white person that I know, it's a big generalization, okay, but everyone that I've ever met, and probably at times in my own life myself, I mean, somewhere deep inside, they think that part of the reason why they're doing okay financially and in whatever, if they are Christian, is because they are Christian. You know, that they
So they
are being
buy into this
specifically
whole,
blessed,
yeah,
because of their goodness, their faith.
yeah, that
And
God bless
so,
them because they're good
and
economically.
what that means is those who aren't doing well. Now,
Are
whether
not,
they consciously
yeah,
say this or not
yeah,
is because they either don't go to church as much as them, they
mhm,
don't have as strong a faith as them,
mhm,
they, believe differently somehow, not
yeah,
quite the right way. Um, so you get people who, you know, when you talk about race or something like that, they 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 get all excited whenever, they know that this group of black people go to church
yeah.
because they think like that's what's needed. Like if you go to church, all of a sudden
Everything's gonna be all right.
you're gonna be okay.
Right,
Like the system will embrace you
right,
if you
right,
go to church.
right.
It's like, well, I don't think you've caught on to exactly how things work here.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
this is not the, that is not the way it works. That is not the way
yeah.
it works,
So they don't buy into the fact that you're being faithful. Faithful also might mean that you have challenge
Right,
systems and move towards
right,
transformation of systems that
right,
dehumanize folk. But yeah,
right.
yeah,
Well, why would you whenever you're benefiting from the system? I
system.
mean,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I mean, and in some ways you think it's a God ordained
exactly. Yeah,
system,
yeah,
that your Christian forefathers put in place out of the darkness of the lands around
yeah,
so that we might be a Christian nation. Well, that's only a few people, but
yeah, yeah,
it's out there.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
out there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, anyway, I think, yeah, back to this text. I do think that even though it's very slimly, I mean, it's a lot of context to wrap around a line or two, in these texts. But, just like you're saying, the fact that he's going to the fishermen, what that
What
means,
that means exactly.
the fact that he's moving from Nazareth up to Capernaum to be by the sea and is going to be, moving and ministering around the sea. Um, you know, the fact that he's picking up this, um, you know, repent language that John used and
Right.
calling, claiming the kingdom is in hand and healing people,
What what about
what
the
is
fact that he moves to Galilee at the time John's arrested?
right,
To
right,
me, that's, I think I was trying to say earlier is that, well, first of all, I think Matthew does a job of showing that this is a transition, but not a transition. This is a transition from
right,
John to Jesus, but it's not a transition in that this is still the inbreaking of the kingdom. Whether it was John
right,
the Baptist, I mean, it's still a
right,
continuation. It's just a shift in now
right,
who the person is now.
right, right.
I
Well,
think
and it,
Matthew does a
yeah,
great job of developing of doing stating that.
right. And I mean, and Jesus repeats the same words that
Right.
John,
John does. Yeah.
used. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in some ways, I mean, it's good to pick up from that 3, 1 through 12 or whatever, from chapter 3,
Yeah,
that part of John, even though we heard it way back in Advent for most
yeah,
people, but,
yeah.
but just to remember that's there, is a good, is good to remember. And then, of course, we're still in 3 and 4, still juxtaposing, that with the Herod of, you know, the Herods that are mentioned in chapter 2. I mean, you still have that backdrop, um, even though you're getting a couple chapters on from there.
I guess I
So,
want to talk a little bit before we close about this. I heard your sermon about the concept of repentance and metanoia,
mhm,
and I heard what you say about metanoia is not just it's not an individual concept,
right,
it's a group of mindset, um,
mhm,
and for me, what when I hear Jesus say this metanoia is it's not just you know you know stop partying or stop doing
right,
stuff we did the individuality thing, but don't let don't let well, I realize that the oppression of empire and this is there, but don't let that determine who you are and what you can be.
right, right. Yeah,
That metanoia is that too.
right. Well, and I think that, part of what I was trying to say too is that there's the Latin repentance, which takes us back to penance,
Yeah,
which is like saying you're sorry and
right,
that sort of thing. So that's very, that has a very
right,
individualistic spin of repent, which is where we get the word. Then you have metanoia, which adds a broader element, about changing your changing your mind and changing
mine,
your life,
right,
and all of that, which kind of is the Greek word. But even beyond that was what I was saying was that the Hebrew term to shuv, or to turn, or that turn around word that would have been, behind what John is saying and what Jesus is saying, probably more than either one of those other, well, certainly not the Latin probably,
yeah,
but even, even more than the Greek word, in their mind, that mindset of, you know and I think this idea goes back to, you know God is laying before you an opportunity to move into the promised land. The God is
yeah,
laying
yeah,
before you
yeah,
return from exile. God is laying before you a vision of what it would mean to live as God intends us to live.
right,
And to be present among us, and
right.
to bring that a reality about. God is laying that before you. But at the same time that God is doing that, it's almost like he's laying it behind you because you're faced the wrong way. Like you know what I mean?
Right,
It's all being put in place, but you're turned the wrong direction.
right.
And if you want to be a part of it, you're gonna have to turn around and look it full in the face and say, I'm heading in that direction.
I mean,
You know,
and I'm not
you
going
know,
to let these
yeah,
negative realities. I acknowledge they're
right,
there.
right,
I'm not denying that
right,
they're there, but they will not determine my possibility.
right,
They will
right,
determine this community's possibility.
right, right. Yeah. And of course the thing about living, the thing about the future God is laying before us, it's not for us as individuals.
Right.
It's for us as community. It's
That's
for us
community.
as a whole people. It's for us, as a earth.
Yeah.
So if you yes, you do have to make a decision to participate, but
Right.
you have to make it a conscious that you're doing it alongside a community that you have to have next to you.
Next to you.
It
Right.
has to
Right.
be a part of it,
Right.
because you're going to have to disassociate yourself with certain types of relationships and certain types of systems that for right now are the only way that you seem to be able to survive. You might have to get yourself out of a job, or a livelihood that
And
seems.
Darren, that's
Yeah,
the significance of them laying down
right,
the fishing poles.
right, right. You
I
might
mean,
be
that's it right there. I mean,
right,
you nailed it right in the head,
right,
We will not let this system. I mean, yes,
right,
before we saw this is the only way that we could survive, but
right,
we will not let this determine our possibility.
right, right, right. Something different's going on, and we're
Some
gonna be a
difference
part of
going
that.
on,
Yeah,
this is better. Not just for me. This is better for my brothers too.
right,
All of us
right.
together.
They might still sit there working on that C, but by the time we're done,
Yeah.
it should be the whole situation should be different. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
still doing it even, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what to me is significant about that.
Let's
Yeah.
bring that to 2023 in terms of church.
Mm,
Um, are we facing the wrong direction?
right. Well, I mean, I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Um, and let's just take it straight to King, right? I mean, let's just keep it
Okay.
in Dr.
Okay.
King's wheelhouse. I mean, he was clear, especially later in his life, that unless we were going to take an anti-capitalist stance, unless we were going to take an anti-imperialist stance,
Mhm.
you know, we were not going to be helping the majority of people out of the misery that they're in.
Right.
We were going to be just reinforcing whatever's going on. You
Right.
know, I mean, and he had to have these conversations around the table with the people who were his inner circle. And he had to
Yeah.
have these
Yeah.
conversations, you know what I mean, in the broader group. But it was clear, to him after years of struggle, and changing his mind that that these were the red lines, like this
Yeah.
system, the way it's set up, is not gonna work for people. You
Yeah.
know, it may work for you and you and you and you,
Yeah.
but when it comes to the community as a whole,
Yeah.
when it comes to the sanitation workers, when it comes to the
Mhm.
all these people, it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
And as long as we keep sending all of our money, to the military instead of helping people, it's not gonna work.
Right.
I mean, and I think the churches, I mean, I know, for example, the people who work in churches are dependent on the fact that all the people that attend their churches um, keep their jobs. because you know because if they don't have their jobs, I don't have a job.
Right. Right.
You know what
Right.
I mean? It's just like,
Right.
let's
Right.
be real about it, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, you know that's point one on the on the scale. I mean, so that throws a big obstacle in front of this message getting out in a significant way,
Yeah.
because you know you're digging into your own pocket
Well, about
as
this. Yeah.
soon,
So
you
it's
know
like,
yeah,
how do you find a balance
right,
between? I mean, economic reality. You gotta have money
yeah, 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 right, right,
to pay the rent
yeah,
and the pay the minister and for the parishioners to pay their bills too.
right,
But at the same time, be prophetic to say that, hey,
yeah,
there's parts of aspects of the system that desperately
yeah,
needs
right,
transformation.
right. Yeah, and I think that and again, this is where I think you were right about how we missed out on some of what was happening in the streets in
Yeah,
2020. Because what I think happened was that it highlighted some things that people were doing in the world
yeah,
that that we don't think about. Because I think that there are communities in different places in the world who have made these same conclusions that we're making right now based on King and the Bible. They made them based on other things, but you know, they know that they need to figure out how to provide as much food for themselves as they can.
right.
How do we grow our own food? How do we
Yeah,
have access to food? Because whenever we don't have our jobs or lose this opportunity for this amount of time, how are we going to feed ourselves?
yeah. Good. I mean, if
Yeah,
we look at this text, I mean, it's not we don't know, but I'm not sure if Peter and John actually walked totally away from fishing.
Right,
But
right, right,
they might not have said they might not have totally walked away from fishing because that's what they knew. They were probably
right,
good at it. But at the same time, again, we're not going to let the system that
right,
controls fishing determine
right,
our possibility.
right, right. Yeah. I mean, so I don't, so I think that there's, I mean, obviously there's so many ways that that churches do know how to gather resources and
Yeah.
and could learn how to share them better, and be a place to
And that's why I
you
wish
know
Leonard here because I think that his thing is rural churches, and I
Mhm.
mean, and he talks about how a lot of rural churches are a danger. I mean, they might have to get to that point,
Right, right.
especially in of pooling resources. We don't have
Mhm.
enough
Right,
bodies. This church
right.
has only got 10 members. Church down the street only got
Yeah.
12 members. I mean,
Right,
you might have
right.
to think about that in certain ways.
Well, and in some of those rural churches, I mean, a lot of the people that are in them grew up,
Yeah,
making sure that they had their own food, making
yeah,
sure that they knew how to,
yeah.
how to survive, and I mean, I if you can in at least a quarter or a third of of the way extract yourself a little bit from the system,
Yeah,
you know, through, helping each other out, through that sort of thing, that at least gives you that much freedom
yeah,
to try to to try to do something.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and that goes back to the poor people that we talked about not attending church. I mean, in reality, we like to pretend like they're all just laying around doing nothing. But I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
most people are. That's not what they're doing. They're trying to get the resources they need,
They're trying to survive.
feed
Yeah,
themselves,
yeah,
feed their kids,
yeah,
have
yeah,
a place to live.
yeah, yeah,
And in today's society, that takes you know probably 18 to 20 hours a day.
yeah.
to, you know, you
Especially now,
know,
you gotta almost apply for a mortgage loan to buy some
right,
eggs.
right, right, right. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, that was good. That was fun. I
Yeah, it
hope.
was.
I hope Marcy had a good. I think she had a study session for
So it's done session tonight? Okay.
her test coming up. So hopefully that was
Oh,
good.
for ordination?
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully
Wow,
that was
okay,
good.
okay,
So
okay.
yeah. And we're gonna do. Speaking of all this same stuff, we're gonna do We're gonna do the Beatitudes next week.
Okay.
And again, yeah. So
So you're gonna do all like through you're
I think
going
it's
to like
five,
you're
1
going
through
to
12,
11 to
maybe
12?
1 through
Or
11. Yes, 1 through 11, 1 through 12. I can't remember exactly.
okay, okay.
Something like
Is
that.
is
Yeah.
that is what's the text for this Sunday?
This one.
The
This one that
Beatitudes?
we just
The one
no,
you just
this
did?
right. Yeah, the one we
Okay,
just did
okay,
is the text for Sunday, and
okay.
then the
Wow. Okay,
text for next Sunday. Yeah.
okay. All right. Okay.
So
It's interesting. This will be interesting. Okay.
yeah, we'll see what comes out of it.
I don't know that. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I still don't know what's going to come out of it as far as I'm concerned.
Still wrestling with it.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Well,
Yeah.
because it's so hard because it's so, it's kind of very descriptive and brief,
Yeah.
but there's so much going on,
There's so much
you
going
know.
on. Yeah. Yeah.
Um and you need all of that rich description to move into the Beatitudes too.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so anyway, it's going to be interesting. It's going to see what we'll
Okay.
see what happens. We'll see what
Okay.
happens.
See what
Yeah.
happens. Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
You can, if you watch it, you can tell me what you thought.
All right. All right. I'll check it out. I'll check it out. Yep.
All
Yep.
right.
All right. All
Well,
right,
good hanging
Dan.
out
Have a
with you.
good week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk